Yeah, I don't know that we can. I think maybe when the microphone is a bit nearer to it, it's not. Is it buzzing now?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Is it a problem for most people? No. Okay. So you will get. By the way, you will get a chance to ask questions or make comments later on in the meeting. So. Thanks very much for all that information, Sarah. It's really useful. Can I move on now to Aaron Kiely, who is from Friends of the Earth, and I think he was at the TUC earlier this week. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much, Ian, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak. So yeah, I work for Friends of the Earth in the National Office, and yeah, this meeting comes at a very, very timely moment really for all of us. Many of you, it's not going to be controversial to say that climate change really is the biggest threat to humanity and our very existence and much of the natural world that we've seen. And already 1 degree Celsius of global warming has resulted in killer floods, droughts, famines, devastating storms in the Caribbean, as you would have seen in recent weeks, and Cape Town earlier on in the year on the verge of running out of water. The window of opportunity to act and stave off all but the worst impacts is closing, and what we do in the next few years will absolutely determine the future of our world. And stopping climate change is really about fighting for a future worth having. And I think together we fight for streets where children can play outside and breathe in clean air, warm homes that don't cost the earth to heat, access to nature wherever we live, and of course green jobs for everyone. Now, Friends of the Earth is party political neutral. We welcome bold actions across the political spectrum from all parties and all politicians in tackling the climate emergency, because this is about everyone's future. But obviously, given we've got 2 Labour representatives on the panel, I do want to take the opportunity to welcome Labour's action to ensure that the UK Parliament does declare a climate emergency, and the councillor who moved the motion for your local council to declare a climate emergency. And really welcome Labour's putting forward of a green industrial revolution, because we absolutely need bold ideas that can cut carbon and build a fairer and greener society. And I want to say this, is that I think it's about time that we did stand up to the divisive view that action on climate change somehow means a driving down of people's living standards and a return to the dark ages. I think absolutely on the contrary. Friends of the Earth know we must end austerity and put record levels of investment into green infrastructure, skills and jobs that, to have a hope of going zero carbon as soon as possible. Because the reality is that fundamentally, as you said from the local TUC, climate change is a class issue. So many of the global elite, absolutely tied up with massive fossil fuel companies and their interests, are committed to a neoliberal economic model that is driving us to the brink of extinction. There's one statistic that kind of always draws this out so starkly for me. The wealthiest 10% of the world's population are responsible for 50% of all climate changing emissions. And on and the poorest 50% of humanity are only responsible for 10% of climate changing emissions. To me, that is just such a stark contrast and shows who is actually driving the climate crisis. So really, taking action on climate change means that we stand up for the international working class, the vast majority of humanity, who are at most at risk of climate impacts. Now, I want to quickly take you through some of the solutions to this. Friends of the Earth is focused on trying to have solutions to the climate emergency. We've developed a 2020 climate action plan, kind of covering 6 areas. So I'll go through them as quickly as I can within the time that I've got. On the issue of transport, many of you will know, and many of you will be maybe involved in Friends of the Earth's campaigning on air pollution. We know that we have to move past diesel and petrol as soon as possible and actually invest in a cheap public transport, cycling and walking everywhere, because it is a disgrace that in many parts of the UK, particularly in the poorest areas, children are growing up with smaller lungs because of how polluted and filthy the air is. And obviously, as we move away from diesel and petrol, we want to see Britain building electric vehicles of the future and constructing those high-speed rail, cycling and walking infrastructure that we so desperately need to keep people and businesses moving. And there's positive signs on this. A couple of years ago, I went to a meeting with Unite's taxi drivers section, and kind of there was a bit of trepidation ahead of the meeting, kind of green, kind of like environmental group and the taxi drivers, but actually very rapidly we worked out we were pretty much on the same side on everything. We both wanted investment in kind of like a transition towards greener vehicles, because the reality is that actually the taxi drivers had to sit in traffic all day, breathing in all the fumes. There was just such a clear common cause there. And on power, this is hopefully, this is going to be a big kind of like change, but it's fundamental. We have to end the era of fossil fuels and ban fracking. We have to have 100% clean energy from wind, the sun and the sea as soon as possible. And obviously we really welcome Labour's commitment to ban fracking and for massive investment in renewables. It's exactly what we need. Thirdly, on the issue of buildings, we have to end the misery of cold, expensive to heat homes, fund a massive insulation scheme and shift to eco-friendly heating, because no one, especially older people and those living in poverty, should ever have to choose between heating or eating. Really, for me, this kind of evokes a very exciting, I'm worried about this buzzing, it kind of won't go away, but is that further away? If I'm nearer, should I move? This could be a bit of like, exciting. Should we try? Sorry, this is exciting, isn't it? You don't really move when you come to these meetings. Is that better? Yeah. Oh, that is better. Great. Well, sorry about that. You've had to deal with kind of buzzing half the time, but on buildings, like I just got this vision of like training up a massive army of kind of apprentices, and those people going door to door, insulating all the coldest homes that there are, street by street. I mean, that's the kind of change and kind of scale of it that we need. And we need to do it obviously as soon as possible. And on the issue of, fourthly, kind of agriculture and land use, we have to move away from intensive farming of the land, obviously have less and better meat and dairy, but actually really exciting things like doubling the amount of tree cover that there is in this country, which is at a historic kind of low. We know the massive benefits of actually more nature, more green space, and I think the reality is that actually beautiful kind of, nature and parks and forests shouldn't just be for the preserve of the kind of rich and wealthy and people that can afford to enjoy them. Actually should be for everyone. And I always remember my mum, when she grew up, our local park, she used to tell me that park was really well looked after, had beautiful flower beds, had a paddling pool, and there was like a dedicated kind of like caretaker to that, and that's been lost over the years. And I just think that we have to reverse this kind of decades of neglect of working class areas. On the issue of infrastructure, we have to make sure that the government is prioritising in all departments action on climate change. We can't have, we have to have climate change really be a deal breaker when it comes to all kind of like major spending decisions. So Friends of the Earth is in court in about a month's time, challenging the expansion of Heathrow Airport, because the reality is that we are in a climate emergency. We can't allow Heathrow to fill the sky with further planes. Obviously we welcome kind of particularly what John McDonnell has done in opposing that as well. Recently, Sajid Javid talked about spending review and kind of commitment to spending. There wasn't really anything in there on climate change, and we know that this requires £25 billion extra additional investment at the very least if we're going to have a hope of moving to a low carbon society. And finally, Friends of the Earth, one of the best aspects of it is that we are an internationalist organisation. I know that's a proud kind of tradition as well of the Labour movement. We're part of 75 affiliate groups across the country on every single continent. That's why international justice is really fundamental to this. We have to stop the government funding fossil fuel projects abroad, and actually have to help countries that are most adversely affected by climate change transition themselves to low carbon, but also protect themselves as well from the worst impacts of it. So for us, and in closing, justice has to be a central part of our movement, and we have to fight for solutions that take all sections of society forward, and that is why we do believe in a fair and just transition to a low carbon economy. We don't want anyone or any communities left behind in this transition. We're really proud to endorse, we're part of the Greener Jobs Alliance, and they just released some excellent training materials on just transition for trade unionists. And also at the TUC conference, I was really pleased to see the Labour Research Department come out with a really good handbook to help trade unionists organise around the issue of climate change in the workplace. That's fantastic to see. And kind of just off the energy of the kind of resurgent climate movement, Friends of the Earth have helped set up in recent months 50 new climate action groups across the country. And these are groups that are campaigning to actually adopt to get the government to adopt a climate action plan, and also to get one adopted locally, and we're really encouraging these groups to actually work with trade unionists and workplaces near them as well, and hopefully together we can build such a powerful movement that, you know, the government can't ignore us. So in closing, we know the solutions, you know, we know what needs to change, you know, we know that action on climate change can fundamentally build a fairer, greener society and take everyone forward. So let's keep building kind of that alliance between the environmental movement and the labour movement for green jobs. And I hope to see many of you on the climate strikes on the 20th, and I hope to see us campaigning together, you know, more loudly and strongly than ever before. Thank you.